something that this country needs. And if you'll notice, what I'm talking about here are the things I've talked about for a long time. And these are not just targeted to this area, but they're targeted for what's good for the country for the long term. Repeal Obamacare, pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution, get our spending under control so we don't become Greece. The energy plan that is an all of the above energy plan, grow the size of the energy pot. And then all of that fits together to give us the final point, which is real economic growth. And that requires low, predictable tax rates. It requires less regulation than we have today, reduction of regulations that are on the books today. And it doesn't mean we never write a new regulation, but it surely means that there are a bunch out there that are unnecessary. And I feel that business in the country feels like Gulliver when the Lilliputians tied those ropes over him while he was sleeping. Another rope and another rope, and these little guys finally tied down this big giant, and he couldn't move. Well, that's the American economy. American economy is tied down by the Lilliputian ropes of regulation. And it's getting to where it's harder and harder for the economy to move. And the entrepreneurs are more and more afraid to start businesses and expand businesses. How much human talent is being destroyed because government wants to step in and take over the parts of our lives and deny us the vigor and the freedom to run our own operations in our own lives. That's the whole pieces of this, the big part. Repeal Obamacare, pass a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution, and all of the above, grow the size of the energy pie agenda, and growth that is laid out here on free enterprise that recognizes that growth in government is not growth. Growth in the private sector is growth. Growth of government starves the goose that lays the golden egg. Because the private sector is the goose that lays the golden egg, and we need to enhance the private sector. And what's Christy Vilsack's plan for any of this? Protect Obamacare, support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker, oppose a balanced budget amendment. The energy piece of this, I don't actually know what she's for. Some renewable energies, I guess, but that's all I know. It's not a complete plan by any means. And the growth side of this thing, I just don't think that people on that side of the aisle understand free markets, free enterprise, and they think that government and unions and capital all have to be at the table before you even start a business. And I'll say, capital needs to be at the table, nobody else. That's my view on the economic side of this, and then the rest of that will come in on its own. And so that's the piece. How do we restore our American dream? Those 4 points. And I'm committed to them. And it's been my life, and it's been my life's work. No part of this is Steve King waking up some morning and deciding, oh, here's a good idea. It's what I've lived for a lifetime, and the time's come for us to act. We need to elect Mitt Romney as the president and a majority of the United States Senate and call upon members of Congress to follow through with this agenda. If we do that, we hold or expand the majority in the Iowa House, win the majority in the Iowa Senate, and we will have the beginnings of a pretty good go for a while to put a lot of this back on track. Living with this $15.7 trillion in national debt and chasing Greece off the cliff into bankruptcy, it can't be in our destiny and our future, and we should not be sticking our children with $51,000 in their share of the national debt. That is so wrong, to mortgage the labor of our grandchildren so we can live well today. That's just too wrong. So I will turn this over to questions, but I want to wrap it up there and say, it may sound like there's a grim world ahead of us, but there's some hard work ahead. When you think about the spirit of the American people, if we get these underpinnings opened back up again and put together, we'll do all that. We've got all the motives to do it. We've got the culture, we've got the vigor to do it, and I'm anxious to be an ongoing part of that. Thank you very much. So, questions or comments? We'll get around to Chris.
Are we headed for like Michigan?
Oh, sir, wait.
Are we headed like Michigan? Is that where you want to take the country?
Like Michigan?
Yes. It's practically a dictatorship over there now. I wonder if that's where you'd like to take the country.
Did you say
Since Republicans taken over, they've taken over a lot of the city councils. They've gone in, and the state has gone in, and the government has appointed people to run their cities. They've done the same thing with their school boards, and I think there's a place to draw the line, and I think they've gone too far. And that's my personal feeling. I want to know how you feel about things that are happening like that.
Well, I remember sitting with some legislators from Michigan, and they were giving me the dropout rates of the schools in Detroit. And those rates were above 75%. I don't remember the exact number. And the school board were riding around in limousines that were paid for by the taxpayers while they had that huge dropout rate. And the future for those kids growing up in the inner city of Detroit was really, really bleak. And so the state legislature in Michigan took over the Detroit public school system to run it until they got it back on track and then sent it back to the public system again. I think they did the right thing. I think the kids in our inner cities were really being disenfranchised, and it's still going on today, although I don't know that that movement's as strong as it was then. That's just one thing I can think of. And you've seen what's happened in Detroit. I mean, Detroit's, there's grass growing between the cracks in the sidewalks in a lot of places in Detroit. They're tearing buildings down just so they can improve their security. So I don't think what happened in a place like Detroit I want to follow, but I don't think that was Republicans' fault because there weren't any in government.
We were following
in Detroit
Bush while they were doing the education bit, and they got their leader from Texas to be the education leader in the United States, and their graduating in Texas is 45%. Now, that's no winner to me. When we're having 85% in Iowa, I think we do pretty well in our schools. The only thing that we've done away with in this state that has really hurt us is we used to have the North High in Des Moines and places like that. The kids that weren't going to college, but they could go there and they could become plumbers, electricians, bricklayers. They taught them all that stuff, and they knew they weren't going to be college material. And this guy right here, he hires a lot of guys that go to the junior college, and I know that.
Good.
Because he's got a business that does machining. And we're lacking in machinists. The whole country is lacking in machinists. But we've done away with it. And you keep talking about Romney and what he's going to do. What has he done? I can tell you what he's done. He sold off all the different companies. He's just like Lear Ziegler used to be back in the 60s and early 70s. And if you're not familiar with them, I'll give you a whole list of things that they did. And we've been suffering in this state from the same thing in the last 5 years. And Linda knows that too. We've lost plants in Waterloo. We've lost our plants in Marshalltown. We've lost our plants in Webster City. And all those jobs that we control because out-of-country companies have come in like Electrolux. They bought them all up, and now they're down in Mexico. Because those people want to make a living, but not $2 an hour. And that's what those people are paying down there. And you know it.
Well, I think we might be able to find some places to agree. And I'd sure like to bring the industry back to the United States. And I regret the jobs that have gone that way. And a lot of times it taxes the industry out. And the labor cost is a part of it. We can't compete with $2 wages, and I don't want to do that. In fact, I'd like to see a tighter labor supply here in the United States so our people can do a little better. But the tax structure is a disadvantage. And for example, if you're going to sell manufactured goods in the United States against that manufactured in Japan, and I lay the numbers out for you, you're going to have about a 28% marketing disadvantage. I'd like to fix that. I'd like to think that we probably disagree politically on a lot of things, but that might be something we can work together on, sir.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things I'd like to work together with to get done.
I'll be open for that. I hope you're open.
Linda knows me. Because I'm from Sac City, and I know what happened to Noble Manufacturing farm machinery down there. And that's what happened when Lear Ziegler came in. And you know what happened to him, too. It went from a town of 3,400 people to 23.
That's right. But let me say also that here we are in Iowa with the second highest increase in individual income of all the states in the union. North Dakota beat us. They struck oil. We didn't. We've done a lot of things right. We've got all our new wealth comes from the land. We renew that new wealth every year. We value add to it as close as we can to the land itself. And if we keep our education up, our investment up, and our optimism up, Iowa will stay ahead of the rest of the country. And I think we got a real chance to beat North Dakota next year. Just kind of mark it down. Hope I can come back here and you come up and say, "Doggone, you were right, Steve."
Well, we're down to 4.8 this week, Linda, on unemployment?
It is improving immensely. I mean, I was doing a good job here. Yeah, I was.
But you always had to figure there's that 2% that is totally unemployable, and that's what we've got to watch. We've got to take care of that 2%.
I remember when we had a 2% unemployment rate. I was in the state senate at the time.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it was called a full employment economy. And I agree. We're going in the right direction, and things come and go, but we need to have a stable tax, stable regulation. We need more people investing, and I'm happy with the skills part. I think we send sometimes people are going off to a 4-year college to be better off to develop their skills and produce our goods and services. I completely agree with that, and I've used my hands to do those things a lot of my life. Thank you. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Okay, on the balanced budget, as bad as the debt's ramped up in the last 2 years, if you throw a balanced budget in, is that something that we're gonna have to ramp into, or, I mean, you can't just turn the money machine off, as it, it was turned up so fast, and we just can't shut it off, I mean, instantly.
Well, there's a couple components to that. I have to go back and check the language in the amendment that we offered, and we'll have to go back and reassess it before we can bring it anyway in the next Congress. But you've got a delay in order to reach that balance. I'm not sure if we have that in there 5 years or what that is, but that's subject to reassessment before we introduce another amendment. Second piece is, it takes some time to ratify. And so, how long does it take to get 38 states to ratify? I mean, I would call a special session and do it tomorrow if I had the chance. But it's not going to be that way. It's probably going to be 3, 4, 5 year effort to get there, and then probably a 3 to 5 year window to get to balance. That's still a better part of a decade if we can get this done. But the message that it was sent would improve our bond rating. It would change the political climate. There would be state legislatures that would have seats that would change that were predicated upon people running for office on their promise to support the ratification of a balanced budget amendment or oppose it. And you'd see the rearrangement of politics in the country at the state level just to position for the confirmation of that. So it is a ways to get there, but what you say is right. If we pull the plug right now, I mean, I'm the guy that, I walked into the Congress within the first month and went to the budget chairman and said, where's our balanced budget amendment? And he said, we can't balance the budget. Well, I didn't really buy that. I went back to my own office of newly appointed staff and thought we would write a balanced budget and offer that on the floor. That wasn't going to happen in that arena. I tried it. So instead, I went back into the Republican Study Committee and began to press for a balanced budget. It took about 3 more years before we could even get one together to offer. That's about the time that we came within $160 billion of balancing the budget. And now I look at that and think, I know I can find $160 billion in this federal budget. If we were that close, we could balance this thing this year. But instead, we're looking at trillion-dollar deficits and an accumulation of over $5 trillion in our national debt. It just is unsustainable. And I want to get this country on the right long-term path. And there's so much about elections every 2 years that sends a cultural message in Congress. Worry about your next election, don't worry about the long term. Or I might sit over there, I know Democrats say this, and Republicans say it too. Well, you got to get reelected or you can't fix anything. Well, all right, that's true. But if you're not willing to take a risk and do the right thing for the long term, even though you don't see a short-term political gain for it, you're never going to fix things. And so I'm out there sometimes pushing hard out on the envelope, taking risks. The country's worth it. Yes, sir.
I feel I know you pretty well because I listened again, microphones and you're on your lot, so I think I'm pretty much in favor of everything you say, but I really have a problem with our congressional leadership in Washington. And Garner let us in there requesting our military. That if they didn't agree, our military took another big hit. And to me, that is the #1 responsibility of government, and we're putting it back to our level. Whether we're happy or not with the war, but we still have to maintain strong military to protect our country. And Obama, of course, has always been anti-military. And now with all of this, our entire Air Force is just about wore out. Our planes have been run until B-52 almost every time. And
We're about the same age then, aren't we?
I guess I'm all in favor of you guys. I didn't do that exactly. I think it's the people that
Well, we have the leader of the Iowa House of Representatives here in the room, and she understands the necessity for discretion in moments like this. I think that the legislation that was brought through on the rescissions package is designed to suspend those deep cuts into our military. I'm hopeful we'll be able to get that done and sustain it past the first of the year. But those cuts don't really go in until the 1st of January. Congress convenes on the 3rd of January if we stick with what we're supposed to do. And we would have an opportunity to put some fixes in place and put that on the next president's desk. I'm hopeful we can do that. I'm not as concerned. Yes, there is waste. There's waste in the Pentagon, and there's waste in the contracting, military procurement side of this thing, and substantial waste. That has to be changed within the culture. I don't know how we can get at it from Congress, and there are those better positioned to target that than I am. So I'm speaking generally across this, that I'm not as troubled by military spending as I am by things like, for example, we see this cut in military spending of $500 billion, and along with a similar package, you see the extension of unemployment benefits that go out to 99 weeks. And I look at that, and I know people. They got to be 63 years old and got laid off because their unemployment would take care of them until they qualify for Social Security and Medicare. Well, it wasn't designed to be an early retirement plan. And what do you get out of that borrowed money when you pay people not to work? The skill of their skills atrophy. Whatever skills they had on that day, they stopped working. They're not developing it anymore, and they're falling behind as technology moves forward. But if you at least build the military supplies and equipment, you're keeping your skill levels up in that industry that we talked about, and that keeps the skilled workforce in place, and you're out the aluminum and the rubber and the paint and steel and the copper and all those things that can become part of it. But I don't know that we have a very good picture, even in Congress, of the global threat assessment. I'm uneasy about the briefings that I have gotten over the last several years. They just seem to be more political. And so I'm looking for a fresh look at that as well, and I just take your comments, and I will digest them and act appropriately, and I'm glad it's a free country, even though I didn't exercise my freedom of speech thoroughly.
Well, like I told Linda when they were going to cut the highway patrol here in Iowa, back even farther than they were. And it turns out that we would have 3 highway patrolmen on duty from 1 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the morning in this whole state. 3.
It helped me to know that.
See, that's where we were going. That was in the legislation too. Dollar cuts and everything else, you know. So it's just like everything else that we do. It has an effect, cause and effect. And I realize, you know, there's a lot of people. Luckily I had a skill that carried me my whole life. And so when I did retire at 66, but when we talk about balanced budgets and what we're building, I worked in industry. I worked at Douglas Aircraft in California, and that was another place where there was a lot of waste, and we saw it all the time. And it's going on even now. We see $1 million bombs, one bomb, $1 million. Excuse me.
However, if you drop it in the right place.
And we all know better than that, right?
There's waste in the Pentagon, and like I say, I'm not very well positioned to put my finger on it. I work with people that do, and I support their efforts. Sir?
Just a question, can you fix this thing? Not you personally, but it seems to me you got to make compromises, and I just don't see that happening. Doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. If you have a good idea, one or the other has a good idea, the other says you can't do that. And it shouldn't take a Democrat or a Republican president, Senate, and Congress to make it work. And I know that's kind of how it's designed to not work, but without compromise, the spiral's not going to go up, it just goes down, doesn't it?
There are a lot of components to that, and some places along the line. I'd say first that we do have things we agree on, and they don't make the news. It's those things go by easily. I just had a notice brought to my attention in one of the earlier meetings today, manager of a local telephone company, that had got up and thanked me for the effort that we did to pull together all of the Iowa congressional delegation in the House, Democrats and Republicans, on an effort to protect their interests so that they could continue to develop broadband out in our local telcos. And you know, I'd forgotten we did that. I didn't think of that. It didn't go up on my mental score sheet. And probably I'll forget about it by tomorrow. But that's one thing that happened today, when a lot of my district was underwater in the Missouri River floods last summer. I wrote a bill to fix that, and everybody in the Iowa delegation signed on within a matter of a week. We get those things going on, but the very contentious ones, some of them are not very compromisable. And another thing that's happened within Congress is that, if you remember, we used to talk about the Blue Dog Democrats. And up until 2010, there was a good number of them. They actually capped the limit. I think it was they only allowed 54 to be members. And something around half of them were defeated in the last election because they were the ones that were in the marginal districts that kind of a toss a coin on whether they wanted to elect a Democrat or a Republican. And in the aftermath of the passage of Obamacare, then there was a major movement change in elections, and about half of those blue dogs were defeated. Well, they were the best Democrat friends I had. They were the people I could work with. I could go to them because they saw the world a lot more closely the way I do. So the result of that, and a number of other things, has brought about a Congress that's more polarized today than when I arrived there. I don't know if it's more than it's ever been, but it's more polarized. There are more people that are, I'll say, hardcore progressives, and more people that are solid core conservatives. I could call them hardcore conservatives too, just to give a little balance to this. And it makes it harder to reach that compromise. I think somebody has to win this fall. I'd like to see it resolved. I'd like to see the American people make up their mind which way we're going to go. Debt and deficit versus addressing entitlements and getting to the point where we bring a balanced budget. I mean, I'm getting beaten up on for supporting Paul Ryan's budget, and it balances in 26 years. And I would tell my sons that you haven't seen a balanced budget since 2001, and now you're 32 or 3 years old, and 26 more years you can be knocking on the door of Medicare and Social Security and never see the federal government balance its budget. So some things are not compromisable. It is polarized. Those things that we can get together on go pretty easy once we can. And once in a while that happens. I mean, once in a while the Dennis Kucinich and the Steve King get together. We have. And when that takes place, we get things done. But you're right that I think something's happened also too, that the Democrats that I know that are my neighbors and my friends and live here in Iowa are a different flavor politically than the ones I'm serving with in Congress. They send, and I sit on the Judiciary Committee. It is the most polarized committee on the Hill. They've come out with, I call them the Constitution demolition crew. That's not the case for my neighbors. They're FDR Democrats. They're second, third, fourth generation from that. They're Democrats by heritage, and they're more common sense and fiscal responsibility than the ones I deal with in Congress. So I wish I had a better answer for you. Jake says I'm getting down to the end here. Yes, sir.
Is there anything you can do to limit executive orders?
Well, I mean, limit executive orders. Yeah, I had an experience once where I went to court to undo one. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And so you can succeed occasionally in court. Congress can act, but you have to overturn the veto of the president. We don't have the votes to do that, and we're unlikely to have the votes to do that even with a different president. So it's a tough task. And depending on which executive order it is, do you have some in mind? Well, I like the separation of powers, and I have asserted successfully, and in particular the case of King versus Vilsack, that the executive officer the chief executive officer of the state or the country, meaning the governor or the president, cannot legislate by executive order. Cannot write an executive order that usurps the authority of Article 1 of the legislative branch. And so I spent my kids' inheritance to prove that. It's more than a decade ago. And I get offended by it, but I have to have one that's egregious enough that it starts to mobilize us, because there's so many things out there to try to fix executive orders and czars and the rules that come down from all these agencies. The idea that we're going to regulate farm dust or manure, it goes on and on and on. And every time that you would turn your energy to one of those things and try to stop it as a proactive part of the executive branch official that is not elected, by the way, another 100 go by you, because there are millions of them out there churning these things out every day. I want to change the appointments from the top as deeply as we can, and I want to see a cultural change in the executive branch and the president's appointments to people that are back to free enterprise and individual responsibility. And by the way, I want to reverse this voracious appetite of the nanny state. In case you wonder how I stand about that, the idea that the federal government should regulate how much water can come out of a shower nozzle. And I've got curlicue light bulbs in my house. I put them where they make sense, but I don't want the government to tell me I have to have them in every socket. And I don't want the government telling me what insurance policy I might buy, let alone have to buy. I want all of that to come spontaneously from all of us. Adam Smith had this figured out. human behavior is regulated if you just let people go out and compete. And that's what I want to see happen, and let the markets do it. And our morality in this country, our faith foundation, and our spirit takes us through. Founding fathers knew it. We know it. We have to assert that in the polls, and that's how we restore our American dream. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, one more question.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm hearing some things that the Republicans and the House were working to come up with something in case Obamacare was overturned. And I was just wondering, are they going to have an effect? I'm not for compromise all the time. I do not want to pay for someone's birth control. I do not want to pay for all these regulations on the food we're supposed to eat and all this type of stuff. That's not the government's job, like you were saying. I don't want Republicans compromising on a lot of this stuff because it's not the right thing to do. And I want Republicans to have a backbone. And I'm not confident Republicans are when it comes to coming up with something different for healthcare, Obamacare, coming up with the debt limit ceiling that's coming up, the Bush tax cuts that are going to be expiring. I have no confidence in the leadership right now that they're going to have the backbone to see this through. So, what do you see being you're there? I mean, you think you can compromise where you need to, but don't bend over like we've been doing.
Well, we pulled into the parking lot. I directed that a paper be written tonight for my review and off of the basis of material for my review to be presented at the Obamacare Repeal Coalition meeting tomorrow. I was on the phone and talked to the head of that, who's out of New York now, because I'm uneasy that you could have a Supreme Court decision and then a behind-the-scenes decision to be made by Republican leadership to start moving legislation that's designed to react to whatever the courts might decide. My counsel there, and it's going to be public tomorrow at that meeting, is let's not jump. Let's just hold on. Let's take a deep breath. Let's assess the situation. We aren't charged with trying to bring a fix in place the day after the Supreme Court decision. I say let it percolate. Let the public decide. Let the election determine this. And after the election, not in lame duck, not by a bunch of people that may have been voted out of office making decisions like happened the last lame duck session, but instead the newly elected, newly legitimized Congress taking place in January of next year should then look at this objectively. And I would start down through, and I've now for probably 3 years, my counsel has been, my position has been, no big package health care deal. I don't want a backroom deal by Democrats or Republicans. I don't want 2,700 pages. I don't want 700 pages. I want to bring one issue at a time. And I could probably list you 6, 7, or 8 pretty quickly. But I'd set the priorities. Which one has the most support and best understanding from the public? I actually think that would be selling insurance across state lines.
Affordability,
In each one, stand them up, spend 2 or 3 weeks debating it, pass it. American people will know what's in it. Bring up the next one, affordability, that's the one. Debate it, and then pass it. One at a time. We don't need a big package bill. Let's do it out in the daylight so the American people know what we're doing. They have confidence. And I just ran into Denny Hastert the other day. He was at the Iowa gathering of the Des Moines Area Partnership and group there. But I mentioned to him then that one of the most important things he said to us when he was speaker was, first you win the debate, then you win the vote. It doesn't pay to win the vote and not have the support of the American people. That was wise counsel, and that's the way I would want to go at it too. And I'm more inclined on the compromise side that, as you said, stand on principle, do the right thing. And sometimes that right thing allows us to bring in ideas from both sides. Sometimes one side has to win.
I have a point. She's bringing up quite a thing here. She's trying to make a point about pills and all this so forth. Right now, in the United States, and you can look this up, young lady, that when we started out after Roe v. Wade and the number of abortions that were being performed in this country, and it's far more than you could even imagine. Today, because we have the pill and contraception stuff being taught in schools, are pills that force the abortion rate down towards 15% of what it was back at the start. Now that's a pretty big move. That we're down to 15%.
It's not my job to pay for it, though.
Why not? Why not?
Because
If you've got
if you're gonna sleep around, you pay for
387,000
it.
children in nursing, in homes around the
There's still
country,
3,200 babies
387,000
aborted
kids that nobody
every
wants.
day.
So what are you
There's
gonna
still
do with them?
3,200 babies aborted every day.
There are
Planned Parenthood
250,000
makes
babies starving to death
millions
in this
off of
world
it.
every
And we could
day.
stop the funding to Planned Parenthood. We weren't able to do that in Iowa, were we? We're still funding Planned
I think
Parenthood.
that's
No,
wonderful.
To what was passed last year.
So,
I'm
you
a
know,
We have also, by the way, on this
I'll tell you
subject matter,
that.
you and I agree on life. You can't equate innocent, unborn human life with hunger. And it's, you have to draw the point. Here's the way I talk to high school people about this, high school kids about this a lot. And you need to come at this from ask the moral question. Is human life sacred? And we say yes. Is it sacred in all its forms? I say yes. Then at what instant does life begin? It begins at that moment of conception. And from that point on, you must protect it. And there are people by the hundreds of thousands lined up to adopt. And there are many, many solutions in it. And you can't make the argument, I don't believe, that hunger offsets life. Those babies are they're innocent. We need to protect them. And that's what I will do. You can count on that.
and the pill does not stop all the sexually transmitted diseases that come with it. The pregnancy is the least of your concern. There's chlamydia, they're young girls that are getting chlamydia that will never have children because they're sleeping around because they're told the pill will protect them. I have a friend that was an OB. She said that the earlier you taught them about sex, the earlier they came in pregnant. The pill is not a panacea.
I agree. And by the way, while I'm heading this up to the president, there was a decision made on contraception, primarily the pill, and sterilizations and abortifations, that's abortion-causing drugs in the earliest stages of pregnancies. That order that came out from Kathleen Sebelius was the order from the president. That was a White House decision that they were going to require even our religious institutions to provide those things as part of everybody's health care package. The Catholic Church especially, but many other churches rose up and objected, and the bishops wrote a letter that was read in every parish in America that Sunday, and the second time Sundays after that, and in many Protestant churches as well, that said, we will not obey this unjust law. The president felt the heat, held a press conference at noon on a Friday, and then he said, I'm going to make an accommodation to their religious beliefs, meaning the Catholic Church primarily, make an accommodation. Now I'm going to require the insurance companies to provide this for free. And repeat it, for free. Well, we know there's nothing free in this country. There's no free lunch. And this is the first time he uses the word audacity a lot. I thought it was audacity for the President of the United States to think that he could legislate, not by executive order, not by a rule, but by press conference. He didn't change a word of the rule. The Sebelius people at HASF didn't change a word. They left it the way it was. That was all of the objection that arose. The president just said, well, it's going to change because I said so right here, right now. That's just, makes me really queasy in my stomach to think about a country that could accept orders from the president as if he were something well above. He's only the president. He's controlled by the Constitution. The legislative branch tells him what to do. He's supposed to execute. That's his oath. And when he doesn't do that, that's serious. And we need to weigh that coming into this election in November. Today?
Yeah. A lawsuit today.
That's news for me. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Biggest lawsuit, 43 different, there's 12 separate civil lawsuits that are going to get us massive.
I'll see if I can find an amicus brief to sign on to so I can wing my little voice.
Check the judgment first.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I'll come back to you privately, sir. And if there's, I'll step back this way. You had a question too, and I'm working my way out the door now.
Thanks everybody for being here. It was such an honor and pleasure to have a congressman with us, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer more of your questions now and ongoing throughout the election. So thank you.
Thanks, Linda.